Okay, hey everyone, welcome. This is the Contour community meeting for Tuesday, August 25th. This is the US time zone meeting. So I will paste in the HackMD here for folks. That is our current schedule. And I guess I could share it too. And we can get started. Feel free to add something to that if you want something you want to talk about. Just pop it in there somewhere and we can get to it. We have sort of a light agenda today. Um, for the, is that the right one? Okay. Is this the right screen? I can't even see what I'm doing now.
Yeah, we can see
Yep.
the HackMD.
Did I?
You stopped it.
Did I stop it? Okay. Somehow I got two of them. I got this fancy like Apple touchpad thing I was trying out, and it's not working that well. Where is it? This one. Share. Okay. And then I can do this. Link. Okay. So I think, I don't know if Nick's here. I doubt he is. It's super early for him, but I think we're looking at releasing 1.8 sooner, meaning like this week. We have a few refactoring PRs in the backlog and in the ideas that we didn't want to throw those in right before release and have that kind of muddy up the release just for fear of it causing issues, just because they're sort of big refactors. So I know one of them is an endpoint thing from James. Another one is some builder stuff that I've been working on. So I think it was more of a, if that's cool with everyone, we'll probably go ahead and do that. Otherwise, state your concerns and we can go from there.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that the next release 1.9, we're hoping it to, given the extended time we're going to allocate to that release all the way to the end of September, we have an opportunity to maybe potentially come up with a big feature that we're working on. So it might be a bigger release.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we'll get some of the notes out soon with that. So that's probably what's going to happen. If anything changes, then we'll be sure to post in Slack. Yeah, what's going on with that? But you'll see that come out probably this week. Yeah, and then Steve, you had some things you've been working on with Gatekeeper, and you want to chat about that?
Yeah, I've talked about this a little bit in some of the past meetings, but I've been working on sort of experimenting and figuring out how to use Gatekeeper with Contour. So for those of you who don't know, Gatekeeper is part of the Open Policy Agent project, which is a CNCF project. And Gatekeeper functions as an admission controller, essentially, for Kubernetes that allows you to write OPA policies to perform validation or policy actions against items that you're creating through the Kubernetes API. So over the past couple of weeks, I've been working on putting together a guide to go on the Contour website that walks through kind of how to get Gatekeeper up and running with Contour. And I've also started to write a handful of sample policies that you can use. So things that perform some basic validations on HTTP proxy resources that you're creating, and also things that enforce policy. So for example, only allowing timeouts to be within a certain range and other things like that. So anyway, this PR is up for review. If anyone is interested in this and wants to kind of take the guide for a spin and provide any feedback, that'd be appreciated. And then the hope is to continue to add to our library of sample policies so that we increase the number of validations that you can implement through Gatekeeper if you're using it, and also have some additional sort of policy-based constraints if basically for you to draw inspiration from.
Yeah, I think this is following up to some of your requests there, Benoit, some of the things that you folks needed in terms of restricting what certain users can define within the CRD. So does this make sense to folks? Would the folks find this useful for their environments?
This looks great. It's actually a great starting point. Are you guys seeing that Gatekeeper will become sort of an add-on to Contour, or would Contour would continue to do validation on its side, sort of like an earlier validation point that's optional to Contour?
I think that's basically how we're thinking about it. Yeah, and anyone else can chime in, but I think we're not going to require Contour users to run Gatekeeper and to use these validations, but if they are, and we have the validations implemented as Gatekeeper constraints, then a user can just get earlier feedback and essentially have their resources rejected if they don't meet the validations that we implement there. But if you're not using Gatekeeper, I think we'll still have those validations on the back end as well, and you'll get feedback later through the status sub resource of your proxies, rather than actually having your creates or your updates rejected.
It's very cool.
It's Michael here. I think this looks cool. Just one thing to ask is make sure that we can sort of reuse our existing Gatekeeper. So, cater to the use case where there is already a Gatekeeper. We can plug into that versus deploy a separate one just for Contour.
Yep, I think that makes sense. And what we have in the guide here as far as the deployment is pretty much just pulled out of the Gatekeeper docs. So I think if you already have a Gatekeeper installed in your cluster, you can essentially just skip the deployment section and move on to applying the policies. But probably worth calling that out explicitly here.
Great, thanks.
Maybe for the next one, Steve, you could do a quick demo or walkthrough of what this might look like.
Yeah, definitely, I could do that. Either in one of these or in the office hours, for sure.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that'd be cool just to kind of see it.
And I think, as we kind of look forward, with this work coming along, that this is obviously going to be super great. But then down the line, a lot of folks are using Gatekeeper and OPA for additional policy enforcement, right? So you can think of a situation where a container has vulnerabilities, for example, and you want to basically just stop all ingress to it, just kind of cut the pipe. So maybe an opportunity for us to extend these Gatekeeper policies to include some of that work as well. I know network policies exist today, so you could actually disable at the CNI level access to pods and containers, but maybe this is something for us to think about for Contour as well, especially if it's easy for us to pull it off. Steve, you're muted. You're talking.
Which one? Media, Steve.
Oh, stevesloka. I thought I saw you start. I thought I saw your mouth moving, but then it was.
Yeah,
muted.
I was thinking of another question. I didn't want to change the subject. So I was curious about folks, what cluster version folks are using. I know here, Steve, you have a 114. I know we've been looking at moving to 116. excuse me, to get the CRD, the V1 CRD spec stuff, so we can prune out the invalid fields. And we've had a lot of issues with folks, having bad YAML indentations or some misspellings or something, and then it applies to the server, and then you think something should happen and it doesn't, just because YAML is hard. So I didn't know about the timing of moving to 116 as the minimum version for Contour. Folks still had older clusters than 116. If you do, let me know. If not, if you don't want to shout it out now, you can just chat me in private if that's something. I'm just curious though.
Just to be clear, you're talking 116 for the Kubernetes side, right?
Correct. Yes, Kubernetes 116.
I mean, we have some older stuff behind, but you can assume 117 for us is okay.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I know 119 is going to come out, I think, this week or so.
Yeah, I mean, we're actively planning. So we've just got to 117, but we're already actively planning on 18.
Gotcha. Very cool.
And plan to keep pretty close. But I think we're also maybe unusual in that regard. There's a ton of enterprise people out there on OpenShift, and I don't know how those versions track.
Yeah, and we've been reluctant to enforce that just for those reasons that lots of users are still, I think, on older versions and stuff. I was just curious and trying to put my finger to the wind to see kind of thoughts around if most folks are there, that's great. If not, what can we do to support those new features that are coming out and with the CRD stuff specifically, I guess. So cool, thank you.
Paul, tracking the Kubernetes supported versions, which is I think 2 or 3 back, is good. Mm-hmm. Maybe mixed with what are cloud providers supporting, but I think most of them 116 is standard now.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting there is like EKS, for the longest time they were miles behind 113 because 115 is considered unsupported now. Like there's no more, I believe, even patching for that. But in the last couple of months, EKS have completely accelerated and now have, I think, 118s out there. So they've caught up and look like they're going to remain current.
I mean, our official support policy. Sorry, Steve, go ahead. Okay. So our official support policy is, it's listed on the Contour website. We definitely don't support that far back, but it's not a hard support policy. Actually, not too long ago, we went and added a caveat there saying that we're interested in working with you, and if you're on a version of Kubernetes that's older, come and talk to us, and we'll discuss it. So actually, I found a note there says, if you're using Kubernetes distribution offered by a public cloud provider where you don't have the option to upgrade to a more recent and supported version, talk to us and we'll find a way to see if we can support your use case. So going by the letter of the law, I guess, we support all the way, with our latest release, we support 116, 17, and 18. And 19 is going to come out tomorrow. So, but from a being good citizens of the community and helping our users and our customers, we're willing to bend the rules a little bit depending on the situation.
I was going to say, for us, we're also tailing the versions from the cloud providers, and mostly like trying to match the lowest common denominator, which used to be Amazon, but they're catching up. But we also have to consider compatibility with Rancher, which we use for internal cloud. So that's another data point that limits us in Kubernetes versions. All this to say that we're at 115 right now, which should be moving to 116 soonish. But yeah, the support policy seems reasonable to me. I don't see any issues with that. I think that the 116 is the big shift because it deprecates a lot of stuff. So that one's a little harder to go through. 114 to 115 was pretty simple.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah. Thanks all for the feedback. Appreciate it. Yeah. So I'm not sure anything else on our agenda. Anything else that anyone wants to chat about?
I had a question regarding, there's an issue I followed a while back regarding geotagging of IP addresses, which has some support in Envoy, the concept of geotags or IP tags. So I've yet to start development on that, but a related issue is the X-remote IP preservation. And basically, we're trying to reconcile all the different options for carrying the original IP address from the cloud load balancer through Envoy to eventually the pod receiving a request. And so, as I understand, there's support for enabling proxy protocol in Contour, which turns it on in Envoy. I was wondering how much control we have over the HTTP headers that are then passed to the pod so to identify the client to the pod.
I'm pretty sure, given the right load balancer, that those should flow through. I know with like ELBs and AWS, like they like not that you lose those headers when you come through. But I think if you use an NLB, then those headers should pop through in the AWS specific world. But I'd be curious if you're not seeing them, then yeah, we should figure that out, because I think that it should just happen now. It should just work.
Okay.
Yeah.
I poked a bit at the code base. It looked like a lot of these things were hard coded in Contour. So would the project be open to like new config options for that, PRs in that sense?
Yeah, I think so. Probably. Yeah. It's just, go ahead and open. If it's different than this one here, I guess this is.
This is the next step. This is sort of to turn that IP address into a site location or continent or city or whatever.
Right.
The first part to that is going to be to preserve the IP address in the first place. So we're probably going to move on that and then look at IP tagging.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I think for sure. I think it'd be great to either add more configs or make it so that that just happens by default. Getting that information, because that's something that Contour should, or Contour Envoy should give you out of the box. I would expect most people would want to see that information. So
yeah, because there's sort of a security aspect to it, and Envoy documents this, and it's just a question of how much you trust those headers coming to you, which complicate things a little bit, because I'm afraid like the default opening things by default may not be a good idea for security reasons.
Okay.
But I'm sort of afraid of the complexity of the configuration. It might end up being as complex as Envoy, which I know historically has been sort of a no-no for Contour. So, but we'll see. I'll start thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead and open issue, and I can get other maintainers their thoughts and stuff on this, and we can go from there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve, I haven't done this yet because I'm still doing some research, but I pinged on Slack about the that Nginx annotation that passes the cert to the upstream.
Yeah.
So I haven't forgotten about that. I'm going to do some research into whether Envoy can even do that, and I'll raise a ticket for that too.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I did a quick search, and it didn't seem that there was a setting that I could tell Envoy to do that. Envoy would do the validation, but I wasn't sure if it would actually pass it through or not.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's my assumption too. I'm just going to have a deeper look, and I'll confirm that either way. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, no worries. And Tara on the call, you did the actual PR for a lot of that work. That was the client certificate work. So thank you for that again. This is what we're talking about, I guess, if you haven't.
I recall seeing that there is some kind of mechanism for passing them. If the question was about passing the client certificate down to the upstream.
Yeah, that is the question. Yeah, so we've got some users internally in Nginx that they want to pass that cert material so that they can actually sort of work on that inside the actual pod or the application.
Right. Yeah. I will also. I think I recall quite closely where it is mentioned in the documentation about Envoy what can be passed. So after this call, I can ping you in Slack if you are there in Slack. So we can discuss this also.
Yeah, I'm in the Slack too. I'll look you up, Tara. Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm curious if there are any updates on external auth, or if the roadmap is still, solid.
Yeah, I believe Nick pushed a change to that. We pushed a few things back. So what we ended up doing. So yes, to answer your question, external auth is definitely on the roadmap of getting done through. We finished up the design docs for that, and I know James has a PR to enable. We had to switch around some endpoint work. So traditionally, Contour maps a cluster in Envoy to a service in Kubernetes. And then the endpoints associated with each go into each cluster in Envoy. There was a design idea with the Auth proposal where we would have multiple upstreams. So just sort of like how HTTP proxy allows multiple services to be mentioned from a single route. We wanted to kind of make that same thing, the same parity go through. The problem is that Envoy doesn't let you have multiple clusters, kind of like a multi-service upstream in the connection to the external auth server, which is via gRPC. So what we're going to do is we're going to have, the alternative is to make a locality load balanced cluster in Envoy, right? So now we can basically have multiple upstreams associated from a single cluster. And to do the weight shifting, you can just apply weights within that locality, within the single cluster. So to the users, the API contract is exactly the same. It's just the implementation in the backend Envoy piece. So we're looking at how we can do that. I believe there's a PR that we've been going through with James, where he's enabling that. That was one of those PRs that kind of changes a lot of how the backend pieces of Contour works, which is why we're trying to push 1.8 out sooner to then implement these new bits and then allow for more validation and testing of that. So I say all that to say, yes, it's still on the roadmap. I was trying to pull this up here. So we have that work done. We just need to get through those little bits there. And then we'll be able to, finish out Auth. I think that's the one blocker to Auth. Some of the work that I was working on was refactoring how, what we call the builder. So the builder is the thing that takes each different implementation. So in Contour's case, we can process ingress resources, HTTP proxy, and what we're looking to add is the service APIs work. So there's this builder package in Contour which takes those different types and then makes them generic so that we can process them through our graph and pass them off to Envoy. So looking to refactor some of that work as well, but that shouldn't block the Auth stuff. So I think this stuff's still on target, or at least this was the new, did this get merged? I believe it did get merged, the new work. So yes, long story short, yes, I think that's still a plan for us to get done.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah.
If I may, this is interesting because when we implemented access log service on our side through a XDS proxy, we stumbled upon a problem where these type of gRPC clusters in Envoy cannot be discovered dynamically. Mm-hmm. And so we had to basically bake in that cluster definition and use DNS discovery as opposed to EDS. And that's how we got access log service support in. So I was wondering, does that touch upon your roadmap item for access log service? Will that be using some of the same building pieces you made for Auth?
Yeah, so I think for the backend stuff, the idea was to have those endpoints match everywhere. So for just regular services as well, because there's another issue with you have multiple streams or multiple clusters in Envoy. If one cluster goes 100% unhealthy, even with active health checks, Envoy will still route traffic to that cluster. So in the case of you have two services you're routing traffic to, and say that whole second service goes offline completely, no matter what we do, Envoy will still try to route to it unless you set a way to zero. So doing this locality stuff will let us actually get around that issue as well. So this solves this plus a bunch of other things. So yeah, so once we have this in there, then we'll be able to do that same work for any other service in Contour, including the logging stuff as well. Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
I had another question. We were talking about like Nginx feature comparisons earlier. We had another case where a lot of our users are migrating from Nginx ingress controller, and they're hosting single page applications, and they're used to some of the path rewriting and redirection support in the Nginx ingress controller. And I know historically, like static responses and redirections from Envoy and Contour have been sort of lacking. I was wondering, is there anything on the roadmap to extend single page application facilities? Because right now what they have to do is basically write an Nginx config and either roll that out as a sidecar to their static files or just host their static files in an Nginx container and write those configs.
So there's two issues, I guess. One is rewriting paths, and the second one is what, static, like redirects to different things? Is that what you mentioned?
Yeah, but the way my understanding is that Nginx ingress controller sort of muddles all that together and sort of hosts my application at this path, but it's doing both path rewriting and redirections, is my understanding.
Okay, because I would say, so do you want that for ingress? Do you want beta 1 ingress resources, or is HTTP proxy an option?
For HTTP proxy, yes.
Okay, because we can do the path rewrite bits with proxy. We don't have that support in ingress. That's I thought maybe you were going, you wanted the ingress support for that. There was an issue I know on the redirects. Folks wanted to like redirect certain paths and certain URLs and stuff. I can go find that. But yeah, the rewrite should work, but the redirects, I think we don't have support for it. You can't say like, hey, if I get a request over, stevesloka.com, redirect this to, stevechris.com or something.
And is this a limitation in Envoy or just a design decision on Contour?
I think it's just we just haven't done it in Contour. It's just not a thing we've implemented yet again. Yeah, so I don't think that Envoy will do it for sure. Yeah, you can have static redirects and stuff. That's how we do the redirect from like insecure to secure on from HTTP to HTTPS. So, we can have Envoy issue a 301 redirect back. So it's possible. It's just we just haven't done it, I guess. So I know there was an issue for that. Someone wanted to there was one issue of certain paths should 404. Maybe Michael, you had this one as well, because we use path prefixes. And so if you say, hey, I have a route that's /foo, that's a prefix, right? So that'll match /foo/bar. And some folks wanted to have that /bar path 404 and not actually go somewhere, because you want to restrict what URLs will actually respond in the applications. So there was an issue, I believe, on that where you could set static.
I owe James a response on that issue, and the reason why I haven't done that yet is that we had some inconsistencies in our clusters with our testing. Okay. So we had some behaving how we thought they should and some not, and we think that's a problem on our side. So I need to go back and validate that. But the general idea is that we'd like a non-existent wildcard domain, if it's not there, for it to 404 versus throw a TLS error, which is what we think it currently does.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So I'm sorry. Yeah, I was making up issues. So so Michael, your issue was based on wildcard domains, right?
Yeah.
There is one in there. I was thinking of someone wanted to do it for paths and stuff. So, I'll go try and find those and I can ping them to you in the Contour Slack. If those match, then go ahead and add whatever details you need. Otherwise, if you wouldn't mind open up a new issue, we can definitely chat about how to make these things work in Contour if it isn't supported already.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. We're just about out of time. Anyone else have anything else? I'm happy to go longer, but if we can end it here too as well. This has been a great discussion, everyone. So I appreciate everyone coming and chatting. Sweet. If not, well, hey, thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it. I think the next one will be the Australia time zone. So 6:30 p.m. Eastern time a week from now. And then I think the next community meeting, office hours, we could look here real quick. I forget when that is. The 1st and 3rd. I have to look at my calendar. So I forget. We just had one last week. So I think it's the week after that. We'll have the next office hours. So cool. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it. And we'll see you all soon.
Quick question. Do they alternate in Australia and Eastern time? So this was Eastern, next week's Australian, the next week's Eastern. Is that how these work?
Yeah. For the community meetings, that's how they rotate every other week. Or I guess the first and it's hard to say. The 1st and 3rd are Australia time zone, and then the 2nd and 4th are US time zones.
Yeah, and if a month has 5 Tuesdays, we skip one.
Okay.
And then our office hours are on Thursdays, and those right now are only US time. I think they're at 1 p.m., 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern time.
Hey, I had a quick question as well. I realized my mic was turned off for some reason.
No worries.
So we are trying to, and I think Kevin can maybe help with this a little bit. We are, what we want to do is basically to replace headers. So how would that work with Contour currently? Because we're looking at a few different PRs, I believe, or a few different issues.
Yes. So you want to replace headers on that the pod receives?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. So you can set, and again, this is an HTTP proxy only thing right now, but you can set a request headers policy, and you can set or remove headers depending on what you want to do. And then you can also, there's a response headers, which would go back to the client. So the request headers would only be seen by the pod. And then the response is what the client would actually get back. And right now you can set, they're just static values. So you can set a name and a value, depending on what you'd like.
I see. So there's no way to do it with a regex or something? Because what we really want to do is to upgrade our connection from HTTP to HTTPS. And so that's what we're kind of looking at. So is that something that is possible with current Contour, or?
Right now, the way it's written, no, right? We don't have any regex support for those. Regex is done dynamically behind the scenes because you can set on a condition set for headers. You can match headers, and that ends up making a regex behind the scenes. But yeah, we haven't done any kind of regex things. I know in the past we've been sort of hesitant to, but it doesn't mean that we can't do that. But I know we had issues before with the specific type of regex and validating that that's the right type that Envoy would take, because there's different formats of how regexes get together.
Yeah, it's a bit of a pain.
Yeah, and I think we had a bunch of issues before using just plain ingress and stuff, so we just hadn't done it yet. So yeah, right now there's not a way to do it through regexes or any kind of dynamic variables, and that's come up. Some folks, like in this example here, they want to pop in. There's Envoy variables that you can inject into these spots, and then Envoy will pop in the dynamic variables as well. But we don't have support for that either. Right now they're just strings that end up in these values here.
Gotcha. So if we wanted to start working on, let's say a PR for that or something like that, where would be a good place to start, in the code base?
Well, the first thing would be great is to open an issue, so we can then chat about it from there. In the code, there's a couple places we could walk through that. I have to go find them for you, but there's a spot in the Envoy package where you'd actually set the header values that you could pass down to Envoy when you configure those. But you'd have to back up and have the right API in HTTP proxy first. Once you have that, and then the builder has to know that, and then you represent that work in the DAG. So the steps would be, I guess, open an issue, and then we'd have to add the types to the CRD. Once they're in the CRD, then you can have the builder process those in, and then have that work its way through all the stuff down to the Envoy package, which actually writes the Envoy config out to Envoy.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and then open that then.
Yeah, you should see that too. If you look for like the replace or the request headers policy in the code, search for headers policy, and you'll see the response and request, and it'll all the wiring's there, I guess, for it. We just have to add the new type then for the regex type.
Okay. Thanks. I'll start looking into that then.
Cool. Yeah, and let me know. Ping us on the Contour, and we can walk through that if you need. We can do another Zoom later or something if we need to.
Sure. Thanks.
Yep. Cool. Anyone have anything else? All right. Cool. Well, I guess we'll end it here. So thanks all for coming, and we will catch you all later. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.